Country, KZLG, KBUK, LaGrange.
All right, let's go to Fayetteville. Standing by is Debbie Bosky. Debbie?
Thank you, Mike. This is Debbie Bosky here at the Harvey Hayek Ranch, and joining me is Harvey and Derek Hayek. Thank you, Mr. Hayek.
Oh, thank you for coming.
Well, you're quite welcome. We have something interesting to share with our listeners today. We have Jonathan Downs here from England. He's the director for of zoology. Jonathan Downs, thank you so much for being here, and you want to kind of tell us a little bit about what we're going to talk about?
Well, thank you very much for having me, Debbie. My name is Jonathan Downs. I'm the director of an organisation called the Centre for Fayetteville Zoology. It's an international organisation which travels around the world looking for new species of animal. But we're based in a little village in North Devon in England that no one's ever heard of. Only about 800 people live there and no one knows where it is, which is really cool.
And you have several folks with you here today, and you want to tell us who they are?
Yes, as well as Mr. Hayek and Mr. Hayek. We have with us Morgan Matthews, who's a cameraman for cameraman director, head honcho dude from Minnow Films in England, who's making a documentary about us, making a documentary about what's happening here. We've also got my darling wife, Karina, who is the person who keeps me from falling apart, stops me losing the stuff, and is generally not only my partner in life, but my partner in what I do all the time. We have Richie West, who's filming us, who together with his wife Naomi, who's hiding there in the corner, run the American office of the Centre for Fayetteville Zoology. So we've managed to take over the Hayek's living room, his sitting room here, and just taking over their whole house. I'm really sorry, Harvey. Wherever we come, we just cause devastation and chaos everywhere.
It's quite all right, but as Morgan here, he can smile because he's behind the camera right now. Yeah, you got Derek over here down on his knees. But the purpose that we're here for is an interesting animal called the chupacabra.
Well, sort of, yes. About 6 years ago, there started to be reports all across an area of southern Texas of bluey-grey, hairless, dog-like creatures. Now, the first of these, as far as we know, was shot by a rancher called Devin McAnally near Elmendorf, outside a couple of hours south of San Antonio. Now, this happened in May, I think it was May 2004, and I got involved because I was making a show for the Discovery Channel at the time. And they came along and they said, we're coming to see the body of a chupacabra. Well, the chupacabra was and is a creature that's been reported from the Caribbean island of Puerto Rico ever since the mid-1990s. Now, I've written 2 books about it. I've done 2 expeditions there. I've been there a couple of times. I've done a lot of work on this. I got really excited. We went out to Devin's ranch and I looked at the skeleton he had, and it was obviously a very interesting skeleton. But I said, this isn't the chupacabra. The director of the film got out his notepad, looked up and said, yes it is. Yes it is. My researchers say so. I said, it's not a chupacabra. It's a dog of some kind. I know, look, we're in Texas. The dog was blue when it was alive. Let's call it the Texas Blue Dog. So if anybody wants to know where that name comes from, it's all my fault. But the chupacabra, it ain't. As far as I know, the chupacabra is something which has only really been reported in Puerto Rico.
And it's described as a hairless dog-like creature?
Yeah.
Okay. So the word chupa, suck, and cabra means goat, right? So that's basically a goat or a goat suckling. And what I understand, they like to suck the blood out of livestock or animals, poultry, chickens, what have you.
Well, the ones on Puerto Rico have certainly been accused of that, but most of the evidence which I have come across so far, and you've got to remember that although I've been doing this on and off for 5 years, looking at these animals on and off for 5 years, we've only this time been in Texas for a few days. We're very early on in the investigation, but the evidence that we have gathered so far is that these things behave, these things will eat and scavenge, they will hunt and scavenge much in the way that most dogs will.
Okay, so do they have certain characteristics that leads you to believe that they're not just a dog?
Yes. Some of the reports of what have come in have been very, very strange indeed. We've had reports that they can to a certain extent climb trees, for example. There are two members of the dog family who can climb trees, and none of them are found anywhere near here. One's found in the Brazilian rainforest, and one's found in China and Manchuria. But we've also had reports that they have got, and this has been backed up by photographs and video footage, that they've got particularly long, odd-shaped, long square-end muzzles with a weird overbite, with the upper jaw being considerably larger, considerably longer than the lower jaw, and often, and I think this is where the stuff about them sucking blood comes from, often with the lips receded to show the two canine teeth much larger, appearing much larger than normal. However, when I've had a look at the skulls themselves, the teeth aren't. It's the shape of the lip that makes them appear larger rather than the teeth being particularly larger themselves. I've examined the skull of the first one from Elmendorf, and the skull, these are not fangs, they're not anything that could suck blood out. And in fact, if we're going to be honest about it, the only mammals which live off blood, habitually off blood, are vampire bats, and even they don't have fangs. They will scratch the surface of the skin, they have an anticoagulant in the saliva, and they lap the blood up. The only creatures, I'm afraid, that have hollow fangs that suck out blood is Count Dracula, and he only exists in Hollywood.
Now, do these animals run during the day, during the night, like most, I think people have also thought it was some sort of coyote?
They have been reported both at day and at night. My evidence at the moment is that they appear to be crepuscular feeders that feed at dusk and dawn, but they are out during both the day and the night. And although these things appear, talking to Mr. Hayek, these things appear to be much larger than a coyote, I think there is some link between them, and I personally think there's some link between them and coyotes. And it has to be said that there's a lady down in Cuero. I can't remember. You've got to forgive me, I'm not very good at English geography, and I left school 35 years ago, and I have only the vaguest idea of Texan geography. But down in Cuero, there was a lady who has passed several of these carcasses off for DNA analysis, and they have come back, and they've come back from the laboratory saying that they are a complex hybrid between coyotes and the Mexican wolf. Now this opens a completely different can of worms.
A Mexican wolf?
Mexican wolf is the smallest and most primitive subspecies of wolf. There's, I think, 37 different subspecies of wolf around the world. But there's a slight problem here. The last Mexican wolf in Texas was shot in 1970. In the late 1970s, I believe around about 1979, 1980, an expedition went down into the Sierra Madre and caught 7 or 8 of them, and put them into captivity and started a captive breeding program. There are 42 Mexican wolves in a reserve in Arizona, which I believe is about 1,000 miles away from where these sightings have taken place. If these things are a cross between coyote and Mexican wolf, where did the Mexican wolf DNA come from? I really, really, really want to know this. Now, I've been talking to a friend of mine, a guy called Ken Gerard, lovely guy, I've known him for many years, and he has told me that in his researches he has come across occasional reports of wolves in this area. And this is the first thing I want to ask your listeners to help me with. Now, guys, all you people out there listening, one of the big things I'm doing here in America is to try to involve you guys, the listening public, in this research. Now, do any of you have any stories about wolves? Have any of you seen them, or have you heard reports of wolves anytime this last 50 years in this part of Texas? I just want to know. If you want to remain anonymous, that's fine. But if you can contact me and better make a note of this because I'm going to be asking for some more stuff later. If you can contact me on John, that's Jon, at, you know, the A with the circle around it, cfz.org.uk. Email me on that, I will get back to you. We are setting up a American office website, but we haven't got around to doing that yet. But that's the first thing I really, really want your help with, because if they are a cross between coyotes, and we know there's coyotes around here, but if there's a cross between coyotes and wolves, where are the wolves? I really want to know.
Okay. You were mentioning something back in 1995 earlier. Was that the first sighting of what was a chupacabra?
The first sighting, as far as we know, thank you very much, Debbie, for reminding me of this. You're good. You're a good girl. You're much better than I am. What I want to do, this is the second thing I want to ask you guys. Now, the chupacabra attacks on the island of Puerto Rico started in 1995 and fizzled out about 3 years later. As far as I know, there has not been a bona fide chupacabra attack in the Canóvanas Plateau of Puerto Rico since about 1998. But the sightings of the spiky creature still continue, but that's another story. The thing is, I want to know about the name chupacabra, because there's a friend of mine, a guy called Ishmael Aguayo, who's one of the heads of the civil defence in Canóvanas. And okay, my Spanish is dreadful, I only know about a dozen words, his English is no better. But we had somebody to interpret between us, and we've known each other for quite a few years, so we can make ourselves understood to each other. And he told me that it was back in 1995 that he and a friend, whilst in part of their official duties investigating the early chupacabra reports, decided to call it a chupacabra from the Spanish chupa, suck, cabra, goat, because this thing had sucked the blood out of goats. However, since then I have received, there's been stories in the world press of people claiming that the word chupacabra is part of the folklore, the Hispanic folklore going back for decades, if not centuries. Can anybody who has got a written reference to the chupacabra which predates 1995, please contact me again at Jon, Jon, at cfz.org.uk. This is really, really important, because at the moment the earliest references in writing to this word, chupacabra, are 1994, and I need to see how far back we can get it. Debbie, thanks for reminding me of that. You're a gem. Thank you, baby.
Thank you. I just want to ask Mr. Hayek a question too. When was your first sighting, or when did you decide that you possibly have seen what they call a chupacabra?
About 3 years ago.
Right here on your property?
Yes.
And was it in the morning, or was it in the evening?
Oh, right after lunch, probably.
So it was in the midday?
Yeah, I was shredding some weeds and I saw one in there.
And what did you do?
I called my son to come
You called
get
Derek
rid
to
of
the
it.
rescue? Okay.
Yeah, I called Derek. And unfortunately that one got away, but later on that day I saw 4 more in a group. And with some of the things we were talking about with John, you know, if this is like a wolf, these animals that I've been seeing, I've seen some up to my belt, and I'm 6 foot tall, so it's a pretty big animal. And I haven't seen any wolf type animals running around here with hair on them, and so I'd like John to maybe explain to me why every animal we see does not have any hair, and if it is a wolf cross.
And I think you actually have had a carcass of one sent off and tested?
Yeah, I did. And when I pressed the lab to find out what that animal was, I got a written statement which is right here. And it's the only thing that they could tell me is that it's an unidentified mammal specimen. And
that
I
is
was,
exactly what
if
it
it was
says.
a coyote, I would like it to say coyote on my lab report, but it doesn't.
And this comes from the Museum of Texas Tech University in Lubbock, Texas.
Yes, and also, oddly enough, if it would have been a coyote, There's also a paper here. They are asking for me to donate that carcass to them to display in their museum. So if they wanted one to display in their museum, they could probably just get one right outside of the lab off the highway somewhere.
Right, if it was just a coyote, I agree with you there, don't you,
Oh,
Mr.
yeah.
John?
Oh yeah, very much so. I mean, to answer your question, I can't answer that because I have no idea why they have no hair. That's why I've come all the way from England to find out. I have no idea. I also think that, I agree with you, it's pretty highly unlikely that wolves would suddenly turn up on a place where there's never been wolves. And then for the only wolves to turn up to be bluey grey with no hair. It doesn't make sense. But we've got the bodies, we've got the photographs, we've got the footage. This isn't like something like the Loch Ness Monster that sort of once every 2 years there's a mysterious something that you see in the water. This is something, they've been shot, they've been killed, they've been weighed, they've been measured. We know they exist, we just don't know what they are.
And I think it's been 5 years now in the Fayetteville area. You said 3 years ago, and there was a gentleman about 5 years ago first reported seeing one as well? Or
Yes, it was attacking one of his calves, and he shot it.
So they do attack livestock.
That's a fact. I mean, he saw it, and so did his brother. I think they would. And back as the first time that we saw one, I think Derek probably shot the first one on our ranch, which was a little more than 5 years ago.
And Derek?
Yes.
So did you keep the carcass as well and mount it with your
No.
knowledge of taxidermy?
No, I didn't. When I first saw this thing, I tried to pursue it really quickly because it was running really fast, and I lost it, for a second visually, and then he showed up on a little berm. We've got some gravel pit holes down here that we stopped fishing, and the dirt is piled up around the edge of it. And he showed up there, and my wife was with me. She saw it too, and I was real hesitant to shoot it because I had never seen anything like it before. I thought it might have just been somebody's pet, at first, because it was just a weird looking animal, Of course, it looked like a dog, but I looked for a collar through my scope on my rifle, didn't see a collar, and I asked my wife, I said, should I shoot it? And she said, you do whatever you want. So I decided to shoot. When we drove over there and saw it laying there, and I decided I didn't want to touch it or anything because it didn't have any hair on it. And it just had like this bluish color to it, and the skin was real wrinkly and had a long skinny tail, and when it was running away from us, it looked really weird because it was like it was hunched over on the back like a hyena, and it was kind of loping really funny whenever it was running. But I decided just to bury him because we've got dogs around here, and first instinct that I had was, well, I hear about mange, animals losing hair, but this animal didn't have any hair on it, and if it had mange, it seemed like it would have some kind of hair, and it didn't have any hair on it. So at the time I didn't know any better, so I just buried it, because I didn't want to handle it. I didn't want my pets to get around it and get the mange or whatever, and so that was about, I want to say it's probably about 6 years ago whenever I shot that one. But seen a bunch more since then. I've shot it a couple before we knew that we were supposed to, trap these things and try to preserve them. But I shot it a couple more and never hit them. They were always running.
They're very fast.
Very fast.
Mr. John is telling us here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, big question. The skin of the creature, did it appear healthy?
Yes, it did. There was no scabs, no blood, no, from what I've seen on the mange, because I've looked it up, and tried to study it a little more, it always seems like there's a scabby or an irritated area, and the skin was just flawless. I mean, it was just wrinkly, but there wasn't a scratch on it, So it was really weird to me to see that.
Well, my stepdaughter's a vet, and I've spoken to lots of other veterinarians, and they all tell me if there was something, any known skin disease, that would make all the skin drop out like that, the creature would hardly be able to stand. It would be staggering around. Whereas these ones are being reported not only doing doggy stuff like running around wagging their tails and hunting things, but that we're even getting reports that they're breeding, and that there are reports of mothers with pups that look exactly the same. And I'm not a veterinarian, but as far as I know, there's no skin disease that you can actually get in the womb that's communicated out. So at the very least, this is a brand new skin disease.
Right. And another thing is that I've seen them in all different sizes. We've seen them in groups of 4 that were, you know, probably 25 pounds apiece. They were all the same size. And then we've seen a group of 5 that were probably more like
50 or 60.
Yeah, I would say 45, 50 pounds on each one of those. So, and that was within a period of a couple of weeks, so it wasn't the same group of dogs that we saw, say, last year, and they got bigger this year. There were 2 different sets of animals that were different sizes, so, you know, they're exact same animals, but the other ones were apparently younger, and so they had to have been bred, you know, and born that way, because that's all I could figure.
And are they all the same sort of colour?
Yes, sir. Every one that I've seen has been identical to each other.
Now, we've got this picture, and I know this is really stupid, going on a radio programme and telling somebody to look at a picture, but you know what I mean. On this picture there, it seems to have, at least to me, it's got a much longer, elongated sort of snout.
Every one of them.
And the ones you see, do they, and the ears pointing out at a sort of 45-degree angle?
They seem longer than a coyote's ears, you know? They seem a lot longer, and they do lean forward in that way.
Well, I've been spending all my time since I started working on this project years ago, trying to tell everybody this is not paranormal, this is not creepy, this is not X-Files, this is not Twilight Zone. But if any of you out there know anything about ancient Egyptian history, doesn't that look like Anubis, the jackal god from the Tutankhamun tomb and stuff? I'm not saying it's got anything to do with it, but it's a pretty good approximation of what these things look like when they're trying to describe a photograph to radio listeners. And I haven't got I wish I had sort of ESP and I could sort of beam a picture into each of your heads, but I can't. So just think of a blue-grey version of Anubis with those weird ears that stick up and a long snout and a weird overbite. So there's something very, very peculiar about these animals, whatever they turn out to be.
Well, obviously, with getting these pictures as close as we've got them, and with Derek's testimony and Mr. Hayek's, they are in our area.
Yes, and there's a lot of them here. In fact, just to make a note to you, the picture that John was just referring to and looking at, that came from Dan Miller. Do you know him?
Okay, over in the Schulenburg area?
Yes.
Right, Yeah, we certainly do know Mr. Dan Miller.
Okay.
Yes, we do.
Well, that's his picture he's looking at, and it looks identical to all the others that we've seen.
As the rest of them I see here on the table, that one right there is pretty gruesome.
Well, it got ran over.
Oh.
So that's why its skin and everything is so messed up. It had gotten run over, and it also had been run over several more times after it was killed, so
But
it got messed
does have a
up.
longer
It
nose.
does.
It's not, it's what do you call that?
Snout.
Snout.
But you'll see, although those teeth look bigger, it's not that the teeth are bigger, it's that the lip is curled up, a bit like Elvis. Thank you very much.
Well, John, I thank you very much for being here, and once again, you came all the way from England to pursue this.
Well, thank you very much for having me. This is not a mystery we're going to solve today, or even next week. This has been going on, this has been something that's intrigued me now for coming up 6 years, and I have every expectation that we'll be back in Texas at least once a year for the next few years until we sort it all out. So hopefully I'll be back, talk to you again soon, and talk to all you guys out there in Radio Land. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very, very much. And that website one more time for them to contact you for that information is...
Okay, you can check out the CFZ on www.cfz.org.uk, and you can email me personally on John, Jon, at cfz.org.uk.
Okay, that's John,
Jon,
Jon at cfz.org.uk.
Yeah, that's right, honey.
I got it.
Thank you.
And if they can't do that, they can call me.
And you can call me, so we can do it.
You can call Mr. Harvey Hayek at 979-249-3075. That number again is 979-249-3075. And we certainly thank Harvey Hayek and Derek Height for sharing your stories with us here today.
You're welcome.
This is Debbie Bosky for KBUK 104.9 LaGrange.
The weather forecast is issued by the National Weather Service for KBLG, KBUK, and the listening area is calling for sunny skies for the remainder of the afternoon today. Highs in the mid-70s with northwest winds 10 to